We've just finished up the last couple of hours, have been Nachas time at Ariel. So as I repeat over and over, this whole project, which is exists or rests on the shoulders of all the rabbis who have donated their time to offer shiurim. And the next rabbi up is Rabbi Starr. I'm going to introduce you in just a minute. But first, I want to thank Simon. And I want to, right before Simon, Rabbi Michal Alterman also had a session. And we're really, really proud. And we're getting a lot of nachas from Simon's session and from Rabbi Alterman's session, because both of you, Congregation Ariel means an awful lot to both of you, and been involved with the shul for a long, long time. We have tremendous nachas to see that the name Rabbi went in front of the name Simon Italiander, even though it doesn't say so on his screen, but it officially does. And therefore, it's real big nachas to see you and to be able to learn Torah from you. So it's a very special occasion and a lot of pride here. And a lot of pride in general in this whole project. So we are now, it's the noon hour. We're now starting the last 8 hours of this 48 hours. So it's really zoomed by. We started, seems like a long time ago, Rabbi Minkovitz, and followed by Rabbi Vakrat. We picked up in the morning. I want to thank Rabbi Dickstein for doing 2 mornings of 4 to 6 a.m. sessions. And I want to thank those that attended with him, the students that came to learn from him, which is really special. You know, people were up at 4 a.m. to learn with Rabbi Dickstein. And yesterday when I came in to take over from him at 6 a.m., he already had 9 people on. So, and the numbers that we have here are not really, we'll get the numbers, all the analytics will come in later. But right now, I'm looking at the fact that we have 16 participants on Zoom. So I want to explain to you all, you came in through the portal of ariel.raisegiving.com. And when you did, first thing that you saw was a beautiful poster that said 48 hours of Torathon. That was designed by Rabbi Michal Friedman, who is a graphic designer and a PR man. If anyone has any need for that, I highly recommend him, especially to Jewish institutions, and because he's got the special feel of those things. So he designed that poster. On that poster, you could see a button that said play. And if you clicked on that button that said play, then you're watching this on live stream. If you're watching it on live stream, fantastic. And a lot of people are, probably as many people. Sometimes we've looked at it and we've seen it's actually been more people who are watching on live stream than are watching on Zoom. So the people who are watching on live stream, it's great, except for the fact that you can't participate. But if you go down a button or two, you'll see click here to be an active participant. So if you're an active participant, you click on it, it'll move you over to Zoom, and then you can speak up and you can talk, you can ask questions and you can make comments and you can be part of the chat and all that type of stuff. So that is a wonderful thing. If you'd like to do it, we'd love to have you do it. When you come in, all the participants are muted, but you can always unmute yourself and speak up at any time and join in the action. So also, while you're on that website, if you would be so kind as to make a donation to help support Congregation Ariel, you know that during this COVID thing, the building has been shut down, but the congregation and the office and the rabbi have been active throughout, and the shul has been active. And of course, with a lot of people and a lot of doubts, many of the income streams that normally exist for the shul disappeared. No aliyahs, no kiddush sponsorships, and so on and so forth. And therefore, this is really important for us to help make up from that crucial lost revenue. So we're trying to offer this to the community. Like I said before, if it wasn't for the fact that the rabbis so generously are donating their time, of course, this wouldn't happen. So it's our rabbis from across the city. And this was the idea. We wanted to bring in a spectrum of all of our Orthodox rabbis that we can learn Torah from. We've had some teachers from schools. We've had kollel, we had the synagogues, and we've had some lay leaders, lay teachers. We're going to have another one tonight. We have the Weissmans. I want to give a shout out to them for a kind donation, helping make this a very successful event. And I'll plug David Weissman's class tonight. I think it's at 7 p.m. tonight. So I want to thank you, and I want to thank some of our other sponsors that we have. Just going to read off a couple of names from a very long list, but a couple of names of sponsors that have sponsored ours have been the Deckers, Laura Druckman, Benjamin Epstein, Danny and Melanie Frank, Michael Frank, and my granddaughter, Baby Bracha, sponsored. So she gets a special shout out because she's the cutest of all of you. Mark Grossfield, the Gutterman family, and mazel tov to them on the birth of a baby boy. Bris is going to be this Shabbos. Junko and Stephen Horvath, Anna Kogan, Tara Liber, Yoni and Danielle Maslin, Tova and Jeremy Norman, Bruce Schechter. So there's been a lot of people, and the list goes on and on and on. Just want to keep reading those out as we go along, and give thanks to all of them for really making it all happen. So as we have at the hour, as the hour switches, some people check out and some people check in. So we're admitting people as we go. And I'm going to turn my attention now. I'm going to ask all of you, if you have an opportunity, first of all, to donate something as you go in or out. But now I'm going to turn my attentions to Rabbi Starr. The first thing I'm going to do for Rabbi Starr is make him a co-host. And now that you are a co-host, you can mute people or unmute them, and you can use the screen share and read the chat and all that type of stuff. So Rabbi Starr is the rabbi of Congregation Or Torah. It's located in Toco Hills, right on La Vista Road, and one of the large Orthodox congregations, large and dynamic Orthodox congregations here in Atlanta. And we're really happy to have his participation. And we're happy that in one way, you know, the community is varied. There's a lot of different people and a lot of different orientations. One thing that we're all united on is the Torah and teaching Torah, especially right here before Shavuos. And because Shavuos is going to be different this year in all of our congregations. Of course, Shavuos is always that time we all come together and it's all that Torah teaching. So we're going to probably be missing some of the hours that we normally would fill in on the evening of Shavuos. But this way, hopefully we're making up for some of it in the run up to with all this 48 hours of learning. So Rabbi Starr, we're really happy to have him here. And we're happy to hear what Torah he's going to teach us. So Rabbi Starr, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spotlight you. And as soon as I spotlight you, you're on and you're the man. There you go.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Friedman. This is an amazing program. And you really took my initial words out of my mouth, which I wanted to share, which is we're told that when Bnei Yisrael prepared to receive the Torah at Har Sinai, which we will be celebrating in just about 36 hours or so, the Torah tells us, "Vayichan Yisrael keneged har," that we encamped across in front of the mountain. We're going to talk about the mountain in my shir in a few moments. And Rashi comments, why does it use the language in the singular, Vayichan, as opposed to Vayachanu? It wasn't many people. Why does it say in the singular sense there was an encampment? And Rashi beautifully states, Ki'ish echad b'leiv echad. That was the time we were going to receive the Torah, because at that point we were like one person, one heart, we were united. That of course we were distinct and different, but when it came to Torah, Torah is the great uniter. I think it also tells us the prerequisite for really truly Kabbalah Torah is that we as a people are able to come together as one. So Yesher Koach to Congregation Ariel and to Rabbi Friedman for bringing our community together. As we are standing at Sinai, we're almost there. So we need to, we're showing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Vayichan, We're ki'ish echad, b'leiv echad, as we're preparing to receive the Torah. And please God, as we stand ki'ish echad, b'leiv echad, not too distant future, may we actually be able to stand together as one without social distancing. So we have spiritual closeness, but we also yearn for a time of physical closeness as well. So what I'd like to talk about is that experience at Mount Sinai. From the perspective of Bnei Yisrael. And since we're told that when the Torah was given, it was not just that generation, but all of the neshama were there. So what I wanted to discuss is what was the nature of the acceptance of Torah. And I think it touches on a very important and relevant topic of our times as well. Because we live in a world where one of the highest values is personal autonomy. In the secular world, certainly, that's what drives almost everything. I'm my own person. I have personal autonomy to choose the life that I wish to choose and to live however I wish to be. It's personal autonomy. There's choice. Where Torah tells us every single day and every single moment, halachic living tells us, these are the things that I have to do from the moment I wake up in the morning till I go to sleep at night. And on this special day, I need to do this mitzvah. On this special day, I need to do this. We're told we live an obligated life. We live a commanded-centered life. So we have these two values of autonomy, in almost a sense, I'm going to use a strong term for it, coercion, obligation, commandedness, which is really what halachic living is all about. So I want to go with that lens in mind. I want to look at the presentation, starting with the Torah, and then looking at the Talmud's interpretation and understanding of what was that moment at Sinai. What, did we have a choice? Did we not have choice? And how does that reflect and relate to our relationship to God and to the Torah in 2020? So I'm going to screen share. And as I screen share, the first text I'm going to look at is, first going to look at the Torah. Okay, so this is Safaria. You probably have seen a lot of this stuff if you've been on Zoom classes. So Perek Yutet, I believe Rabbi Friedman was teaching this section, if I read the schedule correctly. So I'm just going to look at a couple points to get us started. So Perek Yutet is the chapter where we are preparing to receive the Torah. The next chapter, chapter 20, Perek Chav, is the Aseret Dibrot. And here we are preparing to receive the Torah. And it's interesting to look at the language that's used. And the language is, okay, Hashem says, you keep my covenant, you will be a special nation to me. You'll be Mamlechet Kohanim B'Goy Kadosh, kingdom of priests, holy nation. And then Hashem says, I'm gonna teach you all these commandments. And we haven't heard the commandments yet, but what do we read in Pasuk Chet, verse 8? Vayinu kolam yachdav, and the nation said together, Vayomru, and they said, Kol ader sher dibar Hashem naseh, what you say, we will do. Now notice, Hashem hasn't really said anything yet. He says you can keep my commandments and all these important things will happen to you. We haven't actually heard the commandments. It happens next paragraph, next chapter. But they say, we will do. And later on in Parsha Mishpatim, it tells us that actually the language, the famous language, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and then we'll hear. Whatever you say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God, we're ready to accept. Where's the dotted line? And we won't even read what's written above. We're signing. Whatever it is, we're good. Okay, so that's, we jump at the opportunity to accept the Torah. As we keep reading, we see, Hashem says, I'm going to come to you in a thick cloud. In order that the people will hear what I'm going to say to them. And people, you'll have trust in me forever. And he told Moshe, el Hashem. Okay, and Moshe reports that the people are ready. They're ready to accept. And they go through this process of preparing, okay, because this is a serious moment. The 3 days of preparation, what we call the Shloshim Ekbalah, 3 days of preparation. We're in day 2 of the 3 days of preparation. Okay, prepare, sanctify yourself. Don't get too close. This is a moment of sanctity, right? If you get too close, you will actually be stoned, okay? So now you're getting it right. The feel is somewhat fearful, right? You got to be careful. You need to intensely prepare. You can't get too close, okay? And, right, prepare, make sure you're in the proper mindset. And then what's going to happen in verse 16, Perek Tet Zayin, it was on that 3rd day. So they've been preparing. What occurs now? Thunder and lightning and a cloud hovering over the mountain. And then there's a shofar blasting the sound throughout the nation. So, many of us here in Georgia, we might have been to the Stone Mountain Laser Light Show. So every time I read this, that's what I think about. Lahavdil, of course. It's a laser light show. There's a big mountain, and there's a laser light show with loud noises and sound and covered in smoke, thunder, lightning. And what's the people's reaction? They were trembling. So keep this image in mind, right? The first image, Hashem, whatever you say, we're ready to jump and accept this. Then Hashem says, there needs to be an intense preparation. You need to be in a moment of seriousness. You can't get too close to Sinai. That's too holy. And then you have this laser light show of fear in the people that are trembling. And then we get to the next pasuk, and this is going to be our pasuk we're really going to jump off of right as we turn to the Talmud. Moshe led the people out of the camp towards Hashem. And they took their places at the foot of the mountain. Now they're about to receive the Torah at the foot of the mountain. And once again, and once again, Mount Sinai was in smoke. Hashem, however we understand this to be, came down in fire, like fire descended. And what word do we see again? A word that's not used that often in the Torah. Now it wasn't only the people who trembled, but you know who trembled? Mount Sinai itself is trembling. Okay? This powerful experience of fear, the mountain is shaking. Now the people are shaking in their wits, and the mountain is shaking. Okay, so keep that image in mind. And with that background, let's look at how the rabbis of the Talmud interpret this whole experience. But their jumping off point is these words, if you can see that I'm pointing to with the pointer. And they station themselves bitachtit hahar. So if anybody wants to jump in or chime in, what does tachat literally mean? Anyone? Reb Simon, the new musmach of my yeshiva. That's tremendous kavod. Mazel tov, mazel tov. You had the Chag HaSmicha?
No, it got canceled.
Okay.
Also, I didn't finish my requirements yet. So
okay, there's always that last bechina. That's classic YU. So tachat means what?
beneath.
Beneath. So if you translate this pasuk literally, not the way they translate it here, beneath means or under. Okay? And they stood under the mountain. They stood under the mountain. Now, you and I know, how do you stand underneath the mountain? You can't understand underneath the mountain. So what does it mean, stand underneath the mountain? So we understand it to be, you stand at the foot of the mountain, because you stand at the foot of the mountain, you look up and you see this mountain. So it's like you're underneath the mountain. But from a literal read, it means literally underneath the mountain. And as the rabbis often do in midrashic teaching, they will take the reading literally and say there's something to the literal meaning, even though it's not the most logical reading. It's a more literal reading, even though it's not logical reading. And that's going to be the point that I want to jump off of, but an amazing piece in the Talmud that discusses this experience. So let me pull up that next text that if I can find it here. Yes, there it is. Anybody have any questions so far? Feel free to chat or unmute yourself. Okay, great. So here we are. This is from the Talmud in Shabbat, 88a. If anybody here is doing Daf Yomi, you're getting a head start because we'll be getting there in about 2 weeks' time, or less than 2 weeks' time, about a week's time. So look at this piece of Talmud here. Okay, they quote that verse that I first mentioned. They quote that verse that I mentioned. Let me just put this down. Okay, and I'll do it I'll go back and forth in English and the Hebrew. And they stood underneath the mountain. Okay? Literally, remember, think of the literal translation. The literal translation is they stood underneath the mountain. Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa. Rav Avdimi bar Chama, the son of Chasa, taught. Milamei, this teaches us. Shekafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleim tahar kigigit. That God literally lifted up the mountain, held it over their head. A miracle. Lifted up Sinai. So you can just imagine the people, they were looking up on, if they weren't in that fear, right? And they said, oh my gosh. They're looking at a mountain literally straight above their head. That's what God did. God lifted it out over their head like a bucket over them. But Amar lahem, and he said to them, Imatem mikablim Torah, if you receive the Torah, mutav, great, things will be good for you. Vim lav, and if not, sham te'ei kevuratchem, right there is going to be your burial place. You got a choice. Either accept the Torah and things will be good for you, or if you don't accept the Torah, I'm going to drop that mountain and you're done. So I'm not, if we just try to describe this model of Torah acceptance, I think we can all agree that this would be in the coercion model to the extreme. This isn't the personal autonomy model. This is literally, you have no choice. The Talmud continues and says, Mikan modara balo, right? From here on, the rabbi, we if we ever don't keep the Torah as carefully, we got a little disclaimer, because we didn't completely accept it for ourselves. Okay, the rabbis are buying into the coercion model to the point that it's so coercive that at the end of the day, it gives us a little leeway when we're not 100% because it was pushed upon. But then the Gemara says something very interesting. Amar Rava, Rava says, Al Pikain, nevertheless, Adar Kiblu B'Mei Achashverosh. Later on, we received the Torah during the Purim story, because it says in Megillat Esther, Kimu v'Kiblu Hayudim. We accepted. Kimu v'Kiblu, we accepted to keep. Kimu Masha Kiblu Kfar. We accepted to keep what we had already, we fulfilled to accept what we had already accepted. Meaning, on the Purim story, we accepted it willingly of our own volition. Originally at Sinai, we were forced. At the Purim story, we did it on our own volition. So let me stop the screen sharing for a second. And anybody want to posit where the rabbis got this idea that Purim was done at our own volition, in contrast to Sinai, where they want to give this model that it was coerced, where one was autonomous and one was coerced? Anybody want to take a stab at that? What gives them that read? Meaning, if you read Megillah, if you read the Purim story directly, it doesn't talk about accepting the Torah directly. What is it about the Purim story that symbolizes that and differs so greatly than the Sinai experience? Anyone? Don't be shy. Let me help you out here. What do we know is absent from the Purim story? What is absent from the Purim story is blatant miracles, right? It's things happen, but you don't have a supernatural miracle. So you don't have a supernatural miracle, but despite the supernatural miracle, you could have said the Purim story was working within nature. Nevertheless, the whole message of the Megillah is to see the hand of God even when the name of God is not written. So they weren't forced, because they could have looked at it from another way. They could have said, things really worked out for the best here, and we were saved. There was no supernatural miracle. The name of God was not mentioned. You had to look. So there was a willingness to say, it's not forced upon us. It wasn't God holding something over the head and said, you better accept. It was us seeing it on our own. In contrast to Sinai, right? If you have thunder, lightning, God descending in some pillar of fire, a mountain trembling, and as the rabbis take it even further, a mountain held over your head, it's a little easier to say, I believe in God. But am I believing in God because I'm really coming to believe in God? Or, heck, I have no choice unless I believe in God. And especially it says, if you don't accept right now, you're going to die. So that I think the Talmud here is reflecting two very different experiences of acceptance of faith and acceptance of God. One of coerciveness, Sinai. Who's going to say no to God when you got the laser light show going on? You got a mountain held over your head. But the Purim story is one where one could have easily said, this isn't God, this is a matter of chance. That's what Purim is about, right? Purim is the lottery. We don't see things as chance, but one Haman They see the world as a world of chance. We don't see the world as a world of chance. We see the world as a world of purpose, and that's God running the world. So given that, Sinai is, from this Talmudic perspective, is the model of a coercive, forced acceptance of the Torah. But there's one major question that emerges. I'm going to go back to the screen share to see this. The major question that emerges from this read is, but aren't we praised for that we said Nasa v'nishma? That when another Talmudic statement says that God went to all the other nations and said, well, you accept the Torah, and their first answer was, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah states, well, what's written in it? And God said, this is written in it. They said, well, we're not going to keep that. That goes against our lifestyle. Forget it. Okay? It went to each of the nations and went to Bnei Israel. He said, Nasa v'nishma. Tell us later what's written. We're going to accept. So there's a clear contradiction here, right? Between this coercive acceptance and the acceptance of us going and accepting on our own. And we're praised for that acceptance on our own. And we're told that the Malachim, further on in this Gemara, it's actually even in the same page. Here it is, in number 2. Literally just on the same page of the Talmud, you have a blatant contradiction of the experience of Sinai. Rabbi Elazar taught, at the moment that Bnei Israel called out and said, we will accept the Torah, even though we don't even know what's written in it, a voice of heaven came out and said, who gave you this secret that only the angels know, this high level of relationship with God, that first you do and then you understand? So we're praised for this. But how do you jive the two experiences? How do you jive the experience of the coerced, forced experience and the experience of our acceptance of our own volition of no questions asked? They seem to completely contradict one another. So before I answer that question, I want to share with you something really interesting about Midrash. Because some of you may say, that's a really interesting Talmudic statement about a mountain being held over their head. But Rabbi, I read the same text, and it doesn't sound like, meaning the biblical text, I really don't buy into the mountain being held over their head. It seems to make more sense that you're at the foot of the mountain. You're really coming to say that God lifted up a mountain and held over their head. So with this, I want to share with you a little bit about Midrash, based on the Rambam. The Rambam says there are 3 types of people when they approach Midrashic teaching of the rabbis. He said 2 are dead wrong and 1 is right. He said, first group that is wrong are those that just dismiss it and say, that's silly, that's ridiculous. Where are these rabbis making up these stories from? He says, they're completely wrong. Then he talks about the other end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, he says, those who take every single word of Midrash literally. He says, that is also wrong. Midrash was not all of Midrashim are written to be taken literally word for word. But rather, it's something in the middle. The Midrash is there to teach a true message, but it might use a different method to get there, through story or through metaphor, more in the poetic realm, right? A poem can teach a very deep message, but in a more indirect way, because sometimes the deeper the message is, the less you can appreciate and understand the depth of it when it's not given to you black and white. The Meshech Chachma here, one of the Rabbi Meir Simcha Komi Devinsk, says that's exactly what's going on with this Gemara, this Medrash. So look at the Meshech Chachma here in text number 3. I have a translation here of the Meshech Chachma. The Meshech Chachma quotes the verse: "The two children of Israel stood at the foot of the mountain." Right? He quotes the Gemara. It teaches that the God covered them with a mountain as though it were an upturned vat. Meaning, Hashem showed them the glory of God and an awesome revelation to such an extent that their natural freedom to choose evaporated. In essence, they became like angels as they understood that the entire existence of the world depended on the Torah. Meaning, you might as well have held the mountain over their head. Because if you're having an experience, when you hear the voice of God, when you have this descending in a pillar of fire, when you have kolot brakim, thunder and lightning, when you have people, they're shuddering, when you have the mountain itself shuddering, it might as well as be as if the mountain was held over their head. I love this interpretation. And I think it's beautiful because the rabbis therefore powerfully express the experience in an image that makes it so real and so stark that we can say, yeah, at that point, they really had no choice, and it might as well as been the mountain was held over their head, right? It's such an extent the natural freedom to choose was evaporated, right? But sharing the point, they did not have choice here. The message the rabbis are saying in this Gemara through this Medrash is the people did not have choice. They understood the entire existence of the world depended on Torah. Therefore, you don't have a choice to accept or not. So that explains a little bit about Medrash. But we still have our original question. Well, what about the contradiction? If Nasa B'Nishma is free choice, free will, we're praised for that willing acceptance. What do we do with this coercive acceptance, where we weren't given choice as it relates to receiving the Torah? Which one was it? They're two diametrically opposed experiences. So I'm going to share with you a few approaches. The first approach is from the Medrash Tanchuma. And the Medrash Tanchuma asked the question. And they asked the question, how could it be? Right? How can the same Torah that says Nasa V'Nishma, the B'nai Yisrael and others would say they accept that it was a forced coercion with help mouth and help elder of the head. So the Medrash Tanchuma answers, perhaps it's relating to two aspects of Torah. One is Torah Sheba'al Peh, one Torah Shebichtav. When it comes to Torah Shebichtav, it's easier. The written Torah, the Tanakh, the 24 books of the Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses, it's easier to study. It's not as difficult. And they said, bring it on. We got the 5 books of Moses down. We think we can handle that. However, when they heard about, whoa, there's an additional element called the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and that is much more thorough, and it's much more complicated, and there is an endless amount to study and to interpret. When it comes to that, this is a lot harder than we originally thought it would be, and they started to hem and haw. So that's one approach. That's the approach of the Tanachuma was going to say both are true. The first was the acceptance of the written Torah, 10 commandments, even the 613 commandments at its most basic level presented in the written Torah. But then when it came, there's going to be this whole oral Torah, but you have to anybody who's already studied Talmud knows, you have to break your teeth over. It's complicated, it's difficult, it takes decades to master. That might be a little bit more than we bargained for. That's the Tanchuma's answer. Let's look at Tosfot Tosfot is one of the commentaries on the page of the Talmud. On the page of the Talmud, you have the Talmud running in the middle, Talmudic text. On the inner page of the Talmud, you have a commentary of the famous Rashi. On the outer end, you have the commentary of Tosfot, Franco-German rabbis. Some of them are actually Rashi's grandsons, who often disagree with Rashi. And they also ask this question. They're going to give a different answer. And they say, he says, well, hold on. What do you mean? You held a mountain over the head and say, you must accept the Torah. From Tosfot's perspective, why are you pointing your finger and saying you must accept the Torah? I already did it. Like, and it's like when I go to my children and assume they haven't cleaned their room, and I say, clean your room. And in that miraculous experience, they've already done it. And they'll say, we already did. They're not doing it because I told them so. They actually did it on their own, but I just assumed they hadn't. Right? So here, they'd already, Hashem, what are you saying to them? You must accept the Torah. They already said, give them a break. They already said they're going to do it. So Tosfos gives an interesting answer. And Tosfos says, Vafa Pishakavarek Dimanazal Nishma, Shema Yichozrim. They might go back. Meaning, there are a lot of things that we want to do, and we even take it seriously, we even commit to doing, and we say this is a resolution we're going to do, and we really meant it when we said it, but it gets a lot harder along the way to ensure that you're doing it. I can think of many examples. I'm going to start going to the gym. I'm going to start working out. I'm going to start learning this extra amount of Torah. And I think we really mean it. I'm going to eat more healthy, right? Okay. I'm going to eat more in a more healthy way. We've all been there. Okay. We've all done these things. And when we say it, we mean it. But push comes to shove, it's a lot easier to say, I want to do something and I really want to do it than to actually do it. So that's what they're saying. We're not taking away that they really meant it. And they're praised for really meaning it. But you know what? Sometimes really meaning it doesn't hold water. You need to be held accountable. I'll give you an example. During COVID, where many of us are finding more different things to do, some are doing sourdough. So my wife and I started a couch to 5K. So very easy to say, we're going to run the 5K. But if I was doing it myself, I can tell you I'd be out already. The fact that my wife and I are doing it together, we keep each other accountable. That's also the strength of a chavrusa, right? Keep each other accountable for the Torah learning, okay? So wanting to do something, and that's real, but now what's going to be held accountable. So Tosfot says, yeah, they really meant it. And they're praised for really meaning it. Because the other nations said, we're not interested in you telling us how to live our lives at all. But Israel said, we really are interested. But there's recognition when push comes to shove, they're going to need to be held accountable. Because they might say, it's just too hard, or it's not easy. And therefore, he says, when they were going to see that great fire, they're going to say, whoa, this is more than we bargained for. Now God's coming down in a pillar of fire. This is just too scary. That's Tosfot's answer. The third answer that I like to share is my favorite, my personal favorite, and I found a lot of meaning in it. And it's written by the Maharal of Prague. And this is a translation of Maharal. And I think it beautifully brings as opposed to the previous explanation of like the Tanhuma says, no, one was for one realm of Torah, the other was for a different realm of Torah, or a Tosfot that says one was in the beginning and then one is at the end. The Maharal actually working off of Tosfot brings the two ideas and say they actually coexist with one another. So let's look at the Maharal. The response of Tosfot is not clear. The Maharal can say that I can't. The merit of having willingly accepted the Torah has never ceased throughout the generations, remaining as an internal merit for the Jewish people. Yet what merit exists in such a forced acceptance? Furthermore, if there was concern that they might retract their acceptance, remember that's Tosfot's view, then let God hold them out over their heads when they would attempt to retract rather than doing it in the beginning. He says, I don't get it. First of all, to get such reward, it would have to be something that not only did they want to accept, but something that they accepted and were really going to be keeping everything. Secondly, if it was a forced acceptance, it takes away all the power and the reward for praise for Nasa and Ishma. And third, based on Tosfot, if they might retract, then wait till they try to retract and then hold the mountain over their head. Why do it in the beginning? And here's his answer. The reason that God held the mountain over their head, forcing the acceptance of Torah, was so the Jewish people would not say that the Torah was accepted at their discretion, implying that if they would have wanted to, they wouldn't have had to accept the Torah. Given the nature and the greatness of the Torah, it would have been inappropriate that acceptance be at the discretion of the people. It couldn't be that it was just at our discretion. And we chose to keep it because it was just at our discretion. I chose to keep it. Later on, I choose not to keep it. And it's just up to us, and it's a nice thing we might choose to do. That couldn't be the only model of just saying, yeah, we like it, we'll do it. Since the existence of the entire world is dependent upon the Torah, for without the Torah, the entire world will return to primordial chaos. It is not appropriate for the Torah to be dependent on the choice of the Jewish people. Torah cannot be just dependent on choice. God compelled and required acceptance of the Torah, since the continued acceptance of the world depends on the Torah. The Torah is essential for the world to continue. It's not dependent on do I like it or do I not like it. The world will be destroyed once Torah is no longer a part of it in camp. Just because they had already declared Nasa and Ishma will do what you will listen, don't think that it was unnecessary for God to hold the mountain over their heads. Certainly the main purpose of holding the mountain over their heads was not to prevent retraction of the agreement to accept the Torah. Why would they retract after their declaration? Rather, the element of compulsion was an inherent necessity. An optional Torah, which would be in the world simply because the Jewish people happened to choose it, is a very different Torah than the one that was in the world as an inherent imperative for the existence of the world. Therefore, God held the mountain over their heads as a barrel, for if they did not accept the Torah, the foundation of all existence, the world would not continue, and the barrel would turn into their grave. And it continues similar line of thinking. Another reason, so they shouldn't be able to claim that their acceptance of the Torah could be annulled. Since they had originally been the ones to decide, voluntarily they could choose to annul it. Therefore, God held the mountain over their heads to tell them that they were compelled to accept the Torah, and anything that exists as a requirement, obligation, cannot be later annulled. That's what he says. We are praised completely because we fully were prepared to accept the Torah. But it needed to be understood for all generations that the Torah is not just up to us to choose to accept it. We're praised for choosing it, and we have to hold on to both concepts at the same time. We're choosing to accept it, and we're praised for choosing to accept it. But it's not like other choices we made where there's, I can choose to do this or I can choose to do this. There's only one right choice here. And thank God we came to it on our own, but this is the life that we must live. I want to hear your thoughts in a moment, but I find this message to be a very compelling message. Because the truth is, we live in a world of personal autonomy. You and I, any moment, could wake up in the morning and choose to live a life however we wish. As they like to say, quote unquote, it's a free country. If we wanted to, nobody can compel us to keep mitzvot, do Jewish observances. And we know many have left that, unfortunately, left that aspect, that essential aspect of Jewish life. It's a free world, free country. But what we do, I think, every single day, and I think Shavuot tells us this, that although theologically there's no choice, we choose to be commanded. That's the language I like this day. We choose to be commanded. We choose to say that the Torah is the guidebook that we need to live our lives. Not only when it's meaningful and uplifting, and Torah life, for the most part, is meaningful and uplifting. But even when it's challenging, and even when it's difficult, and even when it requires a lot. And on Shavuot, I think we hold on to both aspects. On Shavuot, we both have the experience of choosing once again. We're doing Nasa v'Nishma. And that moment is saying, this is the life I want to be guided by. But also at the same time, realizing the essential nature of this Torah and the blessing and the privilege to live a life of commandedness by our Creator, even when it's challenging, even when it's difficult, because ultimately we know that it's for our own good. So I want to open up if anybody has any questions, but I hope this is a message that resonates as we head into the holiday of Shavuot, the blessing of choosing to be commanded. I'd love to hear any thoughts and reflections. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just talking to a screen.
No, Rabbi Starr, don't worry. A lot of people have had this experience. You're not the first one. And one person actually started calling on people by name, but that's one way to do it. But people are appreciative, especially all the people that were probably as many people as we've had here, more than a dozen people have been here live. There's probably at least that many that are on the live stream, so they can't speak up even if they wanted to, but I'm sure they appreciate the share.
Rabbi Friedman, I'm good. I've had plenty of people fall asleep during my sermon, so.
But not only do they appreciate the share, but they also appreciate the ruach with which it was delivered. So very much thank you. And I'm going to take the spotlight back from you. And I'm going to thank Rabbi Starr for his contribution. I want to say, and I've said this to the other rabbis, I'll say it, Rabbi Starr is one of them. When I originally wrote up this list and I sent it out as an email, I had no idea whether this idea was going to have any traction whatsoever. And the first thing that really encouraged me was I got an avalanche. I had a whole big list of rabbis that I sent out requests to, and I got an avalanche of responses, and people said, this is a great idea. I would love to participate. And as soon as they said that, I realized that there was really something special was going on. And maybe we really had something here. So I really want to thank the rabbis, not only for participating, Rabbi Starr's presenting and all the other rabbis who presented, but I also want to thank them for the attitude that they took towards this, because it was so encouraging. And really, and I'm not kidding, it was the encouragement that I got from the emails that came back from the other rabbis that really inspired me to want to keep going with this. And so thank you. So Yashukach, Rabbi Starr, for a beautiful hour. I really, really appreciate this. And thank you to all who are here. If you're on your way out and you're leaving, please on your way out, consider hitting the donate button. If you're coming in, the new people are coming in for the next hour, thank you. We want to welcome you. And I'm going to kick off or close out this hour with a few words of thank you to a number of people that we have here that made all of this happen. And that starts off, if you came in through this, you came into Raise Giving and ariel.raisegiving.com. So thank you to the Raise Giving people who helped make this happen. Josh Needle has been our technical advisor and guide and repairman throughout. And if anyone needs any similar type of coordinating of multimedia, go to broadspectrumservicesllc.com and you'll get Josh Needle, and it'd be wonderful. Rabbi Michal Friedman designed the graphics for our poster, the 48-hour Torathon, and Rabbi Michal Friedman is available to provide your needs of graphic design and PR. So want to plug that. Also want to thank, of course, our office that keeps us chugging along, and that's under the management of Debbie Kalvarisky and her assistant, which is Basia Heinzelman. So thank you to both of them. And of course, all of the sponsors. We have so many sponsors that are sponsored, and the numbers are going up all the time. So I want to thank them, and I want to just read off some names. It's kind of random. I just picked names off the list, but we have so many people to thank. Jay and Susan Rosenegg. Jay has been not only a donor, but has solicited other donations. We thank him tremendously for that. And Marina Sirota, Zohar Schiff, Bob and Susan Sobel, Stan Firestone, Philip and Gilda Franklin, Adrian and Eileen Grant. I see Adrian pulled in here. So Adrian and Eileen are supporters. I want to thank them very much, as well as many, many others. So Yasher Koyach again to Rabbi Starr, Yasher Koyach to our supporters.